Conoce de cerca a los líderes de la comunicación y el medio empresarial, cuyo talento los ha llevado a ocupar los cargos ejecutivos a través de los cuales han transformado la forma de hacer negocios y dar valor agregado a sus marcas. Escucha el programa Estamos en Comunicación con Carlos Muñoz todos los viernes de 10 a 11 de la mañana por Radio Anáhuac 1670M. Eleva tus sentidos. Communicator, Chair of the Global Board of Directors in the International Association of Business Communicators. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's wonderful. How are things in Mexico City today?
Great. Great things are succeeding in our country.
Excellent.
Bonnie, what can you tell us about the add value of the business communication at the organizations in Mexico and other countries around the world?
Well, you know, I hear executives talk all the time about the importance of communication in their organization, and they're talking about how everybody communicates, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the level of corporate communications, business communications, is elevating. The strategy that we bring to an organization, the breaking down of silos. And then in a world of COVID and change, which we're seeing across the world, social justice, it is more important than ever that corporations have a strategy of how to communicate with all of their stakeholders,
Mm-hmm.
and that they have one voice. And so I really look at it as the rise of the communication professional. I think this is our time. I don't think there's been a better time for us as a profession, because people need to really understand all of their stakeholder groups, understand how they're going to talk to them, how they're going to deliver value, and communicators can really do that today. And then a lot of the things that are important from IABC, I talk about IABC has set the global standard for a communication professional. And there's really this difference between being a communication professional and being a communicator. And there are principles around that are so important today. You know, ethics, corporations having ethics in their communications is so important. Consistency, how do we have a consistent message and we're consistent about what we're talking about? Context, because context is very different to every stakeholder. Analysis, everybody's talking about the rise of data, right? But we can all look at data differently. So how do you analyze the data and communicate it? And then strategy, we all have to have strategy. And if we don't engage, the final is engagement. If we don't engage with each other, then we can't really move initiatives forward. And that really is the global principle for communicators and communication professionals today.
Bonnie, what do you think about the lessons that we could learn about COVID-19 in areas like communication, public relations, crisis, and other areas, strategic areas in the organization?
You know, I think any crisis, it exposes your warts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it exposes your gaps. And COVID has done that on a global basis. Not one individual company or one individual industry or one country is involved with COVID. The whole world. No one has been left untouched by COVID. So in some ways, it's an incredible opportunity for us to really look at ourselves as corporations and look at how we communicate and how we talk to our stakeholders, where we have those gaps, and where we say we provide false information, whether we mean to or not. There's so much information out there. And throughout COVID, what we've seen is the communication of science is very difficult. And we've all become scientists, right? Because we're evaluating the data, we're evaluating what we're looking at, we're trusted, corporations are trusted, CEOs are trusted. So employees are looking to us as Should I wear a mask? Shouldn't I wear a mask? Should I be 6 feet? Should I come back to work? Shouldn't I come back to work?
Mhm.
So we're asked to analyze and look at data that we may not know all the situations, and we're making decisions without having all the information. So I think it's made us much more agile. It's made us in the crisis world say what you know to be fact today and update people tomorrow. Well, we've not done that. We've made far-reaching guesstimations of what's going to happen. But we need to kind of tell the facts. What do we know today? And what are we going to be doing? I think it's also made us look at purpose. Why are we in business? What is our role in the community? And so now we have an opportunity to look back and look at our corporations and say, are we being innovative? Are we really doing what we set out to do? Are we being harmful? Are we supporting social justice? How does that all connect to our brand and why we're in business? And how can we be a part of that? And then communicators have to communicate that in a way to the stakeholders that they come along for that ride. We're all going to change. I look at it, studies say that you change your behavior after 66 days. Well, we're at, since mid-March, we're at what, day 180, 182, 3.
Mhm.
So we've all changed our behaviors, and corporations are now going to have to change to match their consumers' behaviors. And those that do it quickly and communicate will survive. Those that don't won't survive. And so it's going to be really important that we bring people along on this change path. And communicators are going to have the most important role in that, because we have to communicate hard facts sometimes, difficult things sometimes, and then we have to make people want to come along for the ride, as you will.
Monique, how can the organizations be more proactive than reactive in crisis situations? How do you think about?
Well, doing things right is
Mhm.
always helpful. And, when we're dealing with people.
Take more
that's
initiative,
always-
more creative?
Yeah. More people we have, the more things you don't have control of, and that kind of thing.
Right.
I think one of the biggest things is how do you build equity over time? And so when you build relationships and you build trust and you align to your brand, you don't say things that you don't deliver on. When you actually say things and your brand promise delivers on them, you're aligned. So when you have a crisis, people trust you. They say, oh, bad things happen. It's a difficult time, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Mhm.
Those that don't have good reputations, haven't built relationships, then they have a hole to dig out of. And, it's just like if you've released software and it didn't go well and you didn't handle it well, the next time you release software, people might wait to version 3.0 because they don't trust you. However, if you did a really good job with the first release, then you've built some equity. So you have a little room for mistakes. That's the biggest thing I find in crisis is if you do things right, you don't just say you do things right, but if you truly do things right and what you say is aligned to your brand, then when you do come across crisis, and we all will, then you've got some equity with your stakeholders and they will give you a pass.
How can crises like we are living, money, can affect the reputation of the organizations?
Well, I think it's really interesting. RepTrack, which measures reputation,
Mhm.
early on they did some benchmarking, I think around May, and they saw that people were really focused on how are you taking care of your employees, how are you taking care of the community, and then how are you taking care of the customer, which totally shifts the paradigm of the way we work, right? Because usually it's products and services, make sure your products and services are good. But during COVID, people are really looking at corporations of, did you take care of your employees? Did you take care of the community? the global community, so these companies that immediately were able to shift to make face masks or hand sanitizer or something like that, and stopped worrying about their bottom line and started worrying about the community and how can we get back to life. These drug companies that have shifted immediately to making and collaborating. Can you imagine that these major drug companies are collaborating? Who knew that they could do that, right? Because competition is so big, but they're collaborating for a global good, and they're being judged on that, quite frankly, and hopefully in a good way.
You think, Bonnie, that CEOs and presidents in global organizations are really prepared to confront this kind of crisis situations around the world?
No, and you're seeing that across the world that they really weren't. You've got the CEOs that put their head in the ground and said this is going to pass. This is just another crisis. This is just 3 months. It won't come to my country. It won't impact me. And then supply chains became a problem, or, the bottom line started to be hit. Then you see these CEOs that are futurists and they're leaders and they're looking, down the road. And even COVID gave them a little bit of a challenge, but it put a lot of companies, even large companies, kind of back at the startup mode. And, how do we reinvigorate our business? How do we look at things completely different than we ever have before? Those are the companies that are going to thrive. The companies that are sitting there right now going, how do we reinvent when we reemerge? How do we partner with other and find innovation elsewhere? How do we make partnerships within our industry? How do we look, if we're in medical, how do we look at aviation and see what aviation is doing? And some of those innovations can come to medical. Those companies, those CEOs who are looking forward. And then you've got the challenge. I say being a CEO is a very lonely position, right? And I think your best friend is your communication professional, right? But, they are in a position right now to where they're dealing with social justices that they've never dealt with before, and trying to determine, do we say anything? Are we quiet? We are doing good. It's one of those things. A lot of companies out there have been doing amazing work around social justice, but they don't tell anybody because that wasn't their brand. They're soft-spoken and they just do the right thing. But now they're being held accountable. So there's this challenge of whether I say, well, we've been doing this for years, and I come across as being a braggart, as having an ego, not being genuine. So there's this real challenge of a CEO to be able to, connect with the stakeholders and say, here we are, be vulnerable, as you will. I know a lot of people are talking about leadership as vulnerability, but it's really about how do you connect to the stakeholders without being overconfident or saying that we've done this forever when you've really been quiet for a very long time, and this is kind of changing and shifting your brand. And the other thing we are seeing is companies that are just talking to be talking, but when you go connect and look at their brand, they really have never done anything. So that's going to be an equity gap that they have, and they're going to have to close that really quickly, or they're going to be called to task on their reputation from that perspective.
Moni, what is your expert vision about the new normality? What can you tell us about this new life, this new technology and digital life?
Who knows? Will we ever, how long will it take us to get back on a plane and go around the world when we can have these kinds of conversations? I know we all have Zoom fatigue, and we miss the hugs. We miss the real physical interaction.
Face to face.
Let's have a cup of coffee together.
But not Facebook.
It's very, Right.
not Facebook.
But it's interesting to me because I think there'll be a hybrid model going forward. I don't
Mhm.
think that we'll spend our money not so much on travel for travel's sake, but a little more for the major experiences of really in-depth conversations, those board meetings and strategy meetings that you really need to be in the room together, not let's just talk about this one proposal kind of thing. I think you're also, so those interactions, when we have them, those personal interactions are going to be deeper. They're going to be much more meaningful. But, will people come back to work? I think some will, some won't. I think the office industry is going to change immensely. Some people will want to come to the office. That's how they will operate better. That's how they'll function better with their teams. And some won't. I would hesitate to get back in an hour of traffic each way, when, that's lost productivity time.
Mhm. Mhm.
Some of those kinds of things that when you think about it, well, that can be done over video. That can be done digitally. But then I think there's going to be a much higher, we're going to look at digital communications with much more scrutiny,
Mhm.
and realizing what's that trade-off of giving away my privacy to having convenience. And I think we're going to scrutinize that. We're already beginning to scrutinize that much more. And we're going to check out of conversations that we don't want to be a part of, as you
Bonnie?
said in Facebook.
Yeah. Bonnie, what can you tell us about the productivity of the employees in the organization? It is more or less about in terms of COVID-19.
One more time.
What can you tell us about the employees' productivity at the organization with this kind of situation, crisis, economy, social politics, etc.?
Certainly, it's messing with productivity, but then having your children at home with you and in school, and you trying to work, and you're looking at your broadband. I mean, at your connectivity, and you're having challenges with that. So, but I think it's trade-offs, right?
I can tell you that. Remember?
Right, exactly.
Last
We've
week.
had that challenge already. But it's there's trade-offs.
My cat is around here near me.
But we have several trade-offs with that. So maybe we're more productive because there's not somebody coming in and out of our office all day. We can be more selective in when we have meetings. We're not spending an hour each way in traffic. So we're looking at things a little more productivity, with different kinds of productivity.
Mm-hmm.
There's some people who've been working from home for years. Our agency has been remote for we're 16 years old, and we've been remote from the beginning. Where we had a challenge is when everybody else in the world went remote, and they weren't at the same level that we weren't used to the tools that we were used to, weren't used to the way of working, and that even impacted us. So I think we're now beginning to get to where we've got this new normal of how we can work. Now the challenge is will corporations bring employees back? And to what level will they bring them back? And the most important thing is that you talk to your employees, that you communicate with your employees, and you see what it is that they want and what they feel comfortable with, because you're going to get about a 50-50 split. You've got about 50 employees, 50% of your employees that are going to want to come back, and 50 that won't. So you're going to have to come up with more hybrid models. The thing that I worry most about is the corporate culture. There's something about being together, and the ways that you're together, and the way you communicate, and the way you work together as teams, that around that corporate culture, that we're going to have to figure out how to really create that in a hybrid model. But reality is there have been people who've been remote for a long time and have great corporate cultures, so we can look to them for their best practices. We've had people who work alone, they're off in a territory in a different country and they're a two-man office, but we're bringing them into a global corporation and they feel as much part of a global corporation. So we've had that going on. So we need to look at those best practices and how those companies communicate. And if we do that, then these hybrid models will be much easier.
What are the most important challenges that you are facing as a leadership in the International Association of Business Communicators?
I think it's supporting communication professionals at this time. Our opportunity to support CEOs and corporations is unlike it has ever been. And we're seeing the need at a level that, where it's almost obvious when you don't have a communication professional by your side, you don't have that person and that team. You can almost tell the CEOs who have that, who don't, and those that don't. So there's this huge opportunity. So that's our biggest challenge, is the opportunity, right? And to position for that opportunity and to get the word out that there is this whole global standard for a communication professional. And there's this career roadmap for communication professionals. And here's how we can move along these roadmaps and in our career. And then how does an HR professional hire the right person for a communication position? And then why do CEOs and organizations need us on their teams? That's the important thing right now, is how do we advance the profession at a time that it is needed so much? And so that's one of the things that I'm really trying to be, as an advocate for the communication professional across the world, and why corporations need us for that value prop more than ever.
In crisis situations, Bonnie, you think that public relations are more important in terms of strategies than communication?
Well, to me, public relations is a strategy of strategic communications. It's an element. It is the way I'm connecting with my stakeholders. Whereas to me, communications is broader. Communication professionals are looking broader about how do we connect our stakeholders to the mission. So I see public relations as being an intricate part of what you do as a communication strategy, because it's connecting you to your stakeholders to move the needle in whichever direction you want to meet your business goals. And so I think they work hand in hand, and it's public relations is a very important element of the communication strategy.
You think crisis situations or crisis time like we are living, Bonnie, it can make us more strong in terms of communication, internal, external, public relations, reputation, crisis management? What can you tell us about it?
So I think it's important that we look at it from a value perspective, because a CEO is looking at, how are you saving me money, or how are you making me money? I mean, it's really that. It's
the
really
business
that simple.
unit is important.
The business unit, right? So how are you going to help me make money, or how are you going to help me save money? So it's really important that we talk about that value and the value creation that strategic communications brings to you. But when you're talking about in a crisis, if you don't communicate right, if you don't say the right things that are connected to reality, connected to your brand, if you aren't honest, if you don't have ethics, if you aren't consistent, if you don't analyze, then you're looking at a short-term situation versus long-term. And we have to look at both. We're in crisis, this is today, but we hope we're still in business in 5 years, right? So what we say today and what we do today has to be thinking about 5 years down the road. We don't want to mess that up. And so when you're not strategic in your communications, you just answer the questions. You answer the question that was asked. You talk about what is today, and you need to talk about what is today with the future in mind. And so that's really important. And how can I always think as crisis is a opportunity to win.
Mm-hmm.
We're all going to deal with crisis, right? But it's an opportunity for me to build a better relationship with you. It's an opportunity for me to gain your trust. We're in a crisis. We've got to roll up our sleeves and get through this together. So here's how we're going to help you. Here's how we're going to get through this together. Now, when you go about it that way, you're building trust. So guess what? I'm winning. I have a better relationship coming out of the crisis than I did going in. So that's the way I look at crisis, is it's an opportunity. Nobody wants to go through it, but it's an opportunity for brands to build better relationships and more trust than they ever had before by being honest.
Mm-hmm. Finally, Bonnie, what can you tell us about the truth about the importance of employees, the organizations in these kind of situations with COVID-19?
Well, our employees are everything, right? So, we don't have products without employees. We don't have good financials without employees. We don't have relationships without employees.
Some CEOs don't think like you do.
Right, I know. And that's those CEOs might not be CEOs very long. Mm-hmm. That's just reality. Is now certainly he or she has the bottom line to look at, but the bottom line very often runs through employees. And the biggest importance is, how do you get your employees engaged? How are they all working in the same direction? Mm. And, in my old coaching world, when I played sports, we would talk about, we all have to be rowing this boat together on the all same bus, that kind of thing. Well, in reality, we just need to know what goals the business has and what my role is in that goals. So if I sling Java code, that's my thing. I'm a software engineer. I need to know, as a software engineer, what do I do every day that helps reach the business goals? And if I'm a HR person, what do I do every day that helps us reach the business goals? And that's the kind of communication and engagement that organizations that are highly productive have. There aren't silos. Everybody knows what I'm doing every day that's reaching the business goals. Mm-hmm. It's not, I just came in today and I worked my my 8 hours, and I did what I, did. And when the day was over, I left. No, I know that I'm testing software. And if we don't get the software right and it goes out into the marketplace, then it hurts our reputation and we may have to cut people. I know that for my role, quality is really important to this brand. So therefore, I need to make sure that I raise my hand if we're not ready to go out into the marketplace, that I say we need more time. And that's my role. And it's okay for that to be said. But that is a difference in engagement, that I know my role, I know what I'm supposed to be doing, and I know how it connects to the brand and to the business goals. Mm-hmm. And that's the one thing I think most organizations that are highly productive have. Those organizations that struggle and they spin and they have lots of turnover, people don't know why they come to work every day other than the paycheck.
And as an employee, how can I get more commitment to the productivity, to the organization in these kind of situations?
Well, it depends on the culture. But I always say, attend town halls.
My personal ethics, maybe?
Right. I think your personal ethics. I think, how do you align to that business? Mm-hmm. I think we're going to see a lot more of that, actually. People are going to determine where they're going to work based on the company's ethics, based on the way they do business. Does it align with my personal values? Can I actually be successful? You know, paychecks are important and we all need them, right? We have to feed our families. But, you know, at some point when you have a choice between, you know, about the same amount of money, you're going to choose the company that aligns with your values, that you think you can be successful at, that's going to give you the tools and the voice, and you know that every day I have a purpose. So I think that word purpose is going to be more and more in our vernacular. We're going to talk about it a lot more, because employees are going to want to know, what is my purpose? What is my company's purpose? And we're going to make our choices of which company we go to. And there's going to be a lot of consolidation in the marketplace. A lot of companies are going to go out of business after COVID. And so those companies that engage their employees and look at purpose and look at ethics and look at how we're going to move forward and align to their brands are going to see their bottom lines, you know, improve as well. And those are the companies that are going to survive this.
Monica Eber, thank you very much.
Thank you. It was
See you
great.
soon. We are in communication.
Yes.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Esta fue una emisión más del programa Estamos en Comunicación con Carlos Muñoz. Carlos Muñoz, un programa con mensaje transmitiendo desde Radio Anáhuac 1670M. Eleva tus sentidos.